Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour. So this week is Nurses Week, and I had the privilege last week of hearing a very experienced and knowledgeable and wise nurse be the keynote speaker at a dinner to celebrate nurses, at least in a certain area of West Toronto. And she did an incredible job, and she motivated everyone in the audience to be better nurses, and she inspired me. And I thought that it would be a great way to celebrate Nurses Week by welcoming her on our show. So I want to introduce you tonight to Paula Manuel. She is a registered nurse. She's been such for 40 years. She's cared for children from 23 weeks, premature infants to 104 years old. She's a storyteller. She is a resource on how to optimize the well-being of nurses. She's been a direct care clinician. She's an award-winning leader, and she's been recognized by the Registered Nurses Association of Ontario for an award of merit, lifetime achievement. And a few days ago, that I got to sit and see her receive a Excellence in Lifelong Advocacy from her colleagues, patients, and communities in the nursing profession. As I mentioned, it's Nursing Week this week, and so we've got Paula to share her experiences. Paula, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Always a wonderful opportunity to profile nursing and the people who perform this miraculous work every day. Especially with the recent times with the pandemic. And it's been a tough go for people. And I certainly feel I had my turn at the wheel, so to speak, and I've made the impacts that I can. And now I'm like this wise crone on a hill. But I love nursing. I've always loved nursing. And it's been terrific to have some legacy work to perform.
How old were you when you decided to become a nurse, and why did you decide to become a nurse?
5 years old.
5 years old. And why?
It was something I always knew I wanted to do. I kind of believe that we come with a contractual arrangement as what we're going to do with our life. And from very early on, I was telling the world I'm going to be a nurse. And so I pursued kind of activities and academic to go to nursing school. And because of finances and different things, I started off with college, Humber College, great school for graduating nurses. And then I followed that up a few years later with my baccalaureate and my master's at Athabasca.
And you say you have a contract. We're born with a contract. A contract with who? With God?
With the universe.
With the universe.
Yeah.
So
it's like we all come with a purpose.
It's sort of like a calling?
Yeah, in many ways. It's like a call to come and check it out.
Paula, many people go through their whole life never figuring out what their meaning is, what their purpose is. How come?
Yeah, maybe it's not their first time. I certainly believe in multiple lives, and I feel like I'm an old soul. So it's interesting that way. And this time, my opportunity was to be a nurse. And so if you think about that, that's a lot of influence on a lot of people's lives.
It sure has been, I'm sure.
Yeah.
What's changed the most for you over the 40 years that you've spent in nursing?
Computers. There were no computers, no monitoring devices that were accurate. It was very reliant on nursing assessment and intuition. Having the tools to monitor people much closer has been remarkable. And now we're on the cusp of artificial intelligence, which will make it even more interesting with an algorithm that's able to work with the nurses and assess people in a much earlier trajectory.
You spoke about care and compassion and numerous other sort of attitudes that you think nurses have to have in your keynote speech. How does care and compassion work along with computers and AI?
Well, nursing provides the humanizing qualities because people don't get better because of a computer. It's inspiring people to want to get better. It's listening to their fears. It's seeing the person, not just a piece of flesh in front of you. It's breaking through and being a professional friend. Some of the best conversations I've ever had are 3 o'clock in the morning when people are at their most vulnerable and they are scared, perhaps, and you're able to listen without judgment, without constructing a different reality for them. It's just like, this is what you're faced with. And it makes a difference when people feel like they're heard. And even children, as young as 7 or 6, are able to articulate that they are aware of what's going on. Children who didn't want another heart transplant, they were done with everything.
It sounds to me like you think that the job of a nurse is actually like a therapist or a friend or almost like a priest or
It's all of those things. There's an interesting observation that from nursing grew about 10 or 12 professions in the hospital setting. Pharmacists, pharmacy technicians, social workers, spiritual services, because historically nurses were from the religious orders in Canada. A lot of the hospitals were religious based. And it's a lot of different things combined. And I call it the Renaissance profession.
the Renaissance profession.
Yeah, because you have to have the arts and have to have science, you have to have social studies. And if you think about the work I've been recognized for, advocacy, that's also part of the package. So it's been very interesting in terms of the changes and differences. And the difficulties can be that you get the computers and the machinery and you forget about the person. So I was always the person saying, start with the child or start with the adult and work your way backwards to the wall that people are plugged into.
I'm very interested in hearing more about the role you've played in advocacy, but maybe we'll leave that for after one of our message breaks, because it's, I think, quite a significant role that you've been playing, and I think you've expressed some points of view as to what we need to do to make our healthcare system better. But let's just go back to you. Over time, what was your favorite job in your 40-year career?
I was manager of a team of medicine nurses. It was really terrific to take a group that was a bit fragmented and working to work together as a coalesced team. And it was terrific to hear the reputation of the ward change from, we don't want our patients transferred there, to, we're not transferring our patient unless they're going to this level. So that was a real testament to the team responding to the coaching, and it was a blast that way. It was also pointing out to families like milestones of life, which is like your loved one's not going to live forever. This is 95-year-olds. They want everything done. And what does that look like? And what does that mean? And in fairness to that 95-year-old who's lying in the bed, not nourished well, in contractures, has had significant damage to their brain. And it was interesting to find out the reasons people had for wanting to keep treatment going. And some of it was financial. They were collecting their loved one's pension. They were living in their loved one's house. And if they died, they would have to have a change of address. So it was also being an advocate for those patients that couldn't speak for themselves. I was a bit of a confronter, question the status quo.
That's interesting. That must have been very difficult to almost get in between a patient and their loved one. Is that the role of a nurse, you believe?
Sometimes it is. You have to recognize if there's any shred of abuse, and that's a nasty word I have to use, but it is akin to that. You can let the family know that you're onto them. And it was interesting how some families would change and others would be really resistant because they were threatened by that.
I can imagine they'd be threatened. If I had you telling me that I was keeping my loved one alive just for my own benefit. That's got to be a pretty hard hitting message to
Well, there's
receive from
ways
someone
of
like you.
saying there's ways of saying things, and I've been gifted with the ability to be articulate. I can be soft when I start, but the tone gets more acute as the time goes on. Um,
So it seems like you've just had an incredible gamut portfolio, breadth of roles. Give me a sense of the different roles that you've played over your 40-year career in nursing, if you could.
well, I have a lovely masterpiece story, which is when I was a neonatal nurse, and I had a young lady who was, of her first 27 days, I had her for 24 shifts, and we had a good time together. She was a good kid, feisty, and she was 29 weeks gestation. Um, I met her when she was under phototherapy lights, which is where the yellow tinge that kids get with the blood cells breaking down in their body. So she was a little princess. She didn't like the wet diaper. There'd be 4 drops of pee and she'd kick it away. So we did that 3 times. Then I got wise to her and I taped the diaper to the bed. And then she's kicking away and she couldn't get it moved. And I opened up the porthole of the isolette, leaned down, and I went. Her parents told me later they weren't sure if they were horrified or thought this was kind of cool that I was taking on a little 29 weeker. But I certainly got the better of her on that day. But she has grown into a marathoner, a scuba diver, a nurse with a master's degree in counseling. She's smart as a whip, terrific young lady. And it's lovely to think I had a part in her start. And that was pretty wild.
It's very special. Do you keep in touch with many of the patients that you've dealt with?
No, not very many. No. It's
So you were a what did you describe it as, a prenatal nurse?
a neonatal nurse,
Neonatal nurse.
neonatal intensive care unit.
Okay. Tell me some other roles, please.
I transferred to pediatrics and found more babies, which was fine. And I became a cardiac specialist. So the pediatric cardiac critical care was incredibly sick children with quite significant heart disease, congenital conditions. So you had to be a soft touch, but also rapid in your assessments and interventions. So one of my managers at the time said that when she looked at the assignment board, which lists the names and the staff that are assigned to those rooms and those patients, she said invariably she would see my name and know that it was one of the sickest children in Canada. And my reputation was keeping children on an even keel, if not a little better. Certainly, despite my best efforts, some of them did pass. But it would be changing the gears. As I said in my keynote the other night, you either take the patient and accompany them to health, or you accompany them as far as you can go before they cross over to the next room or the next dimension or wherever we go after we finish in this dimension. So that was tremendously demanding. And it got really hard when they were doing interventions on sicker children and you realized you were participating in causing pain to children and suffering and despair. That was hard. That's when you begin to realize you may have been overstaying your welcome.
Yeah.
Yeah. But the sheer volume, it's like infusions, 14 infusions, which is the medications that are running into the child. Nutrition that's done IV, that's running into the child. So it's like a spaghetti picture of lines and different things. Yeah.
What an incredible career that you've had, and in such a incredibly important role for society that you take care of us. I really thank you for that, Roland, and I thank you for the inspiration in your keynote speech. I really enjoyed it, and it was. You know, you go to these dinners and you sit down beside someone as you and I sat down beside, and you never know whether you're going to end up having an interesting conversation or not. And I had a wonderful conversation with you, and I came away inspired. So thank you for that. We're going to take a break for some messages, and we're going to come back in just 2 minutes with Paula, the keynote speaker at a Nursing Week dinner last week. She's 40 years in nursing, and she's going to tell us a little bit about her career, about nursing, about the advocacy role that she's been playing, and I think some about our healthcare system and where we've gone wrong and where we need to go. Stay with us, everyone. We're going to come back in just 2 minutes. Welcome back, everyone, to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour. This week is Nursing Week in Ontario, maybe actually around the world. I'm not sure, but I was privileged to sit at a table beside a very impressive lady by the name of Paula Manuel last week, and she was the keynote speaker. We had a nice conversation at dinner, and then I was wowed when she got up and number one, made a great keynote speech, and then later on received a lifetime achievement award for lifelong advocacy. And obviously she had a ton of respect within the room by the nurses that were there. And as she described her career and what she's done, it's obvious that she's played an important role in nursing in our area. Paula, is nursing a tough job? Is it a dangerous job?
Yeah, on both counts. It's difficult because you have to be ready to do the work to protect yourself from the emotional toil. It's not natural to see people in pain. It's not natural to see the pace of death that can be happening in a setting. There's many different settings of nursing, and some are not as exposed to some of the dangers. And the merge nurses are an example of being physically endangered because some people with mental health issues and violence, they're frustrated and they lash out. So the coping abilities of the nurse is really key. And there's ways of de-escalating behavior, which requires some moxie on the part of the nurse. You have to be comfortable in yourself to say, stop, no. You don't give a speech when situations like that. You break it down to basic commands and implications of what's going to happen with their behavior. People are desperate when they're seeking drugs, and if they're scared, you have to be. It's very much like a wild animal.
A wild animal, really? Seriously?
Yeah. When you see people lashing, then it takes 7 people to take them down. The security guards are great. They're much more educated now than they were years ago. It used to be a bit of a joke with security, but now they have the demeanor and training. Some of them are police foundation graduates, so that helps. But it's about being nurses safe for sure, and you have to learn to be aware in your environment, spatial awareness. You never got to the bedside without an escape route mapped out. People came into your space. I was very comfortable to say, I need space to work, so would you please back off? And I had one father one time who grabbed me. I said, you will unhand me or I will call the police. And that got through his consciousness pretty good.
You always go into a room with an escape route mapped out.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah. Because you never know when something's going to happen. You have to be aware. And that's pretty unfortunate to have to do that, but I avoided
that. That's amazing.
Avoided fits, avoided kicks, and then there's the verbal assaults that happen, and that the profanity and derogatory names, and you just come back with them with courtesy, professionalism, and no fear.
So, it's been interesting in my experiences in the healthcare system, and I've generally had reasonably good experiences with our healthcare system, but wait times, delays, are an issue. And, lots of people have talked about this. And my sense is that the nurses get the brunt of the complaints about that. Maybe the admissions people as well. But, once the doctor finally comes, you're respectful, but the nurses get the complaints about how come the doctor's not coming and having to deal with the delays and stuff like that. Is that challenging?
It can be. I was in the merge with my father, and I heard a family member complaining about having waited for so long, and it was like this person's been looked at by before my mother, and it was carrying on, and the staff were not managing it too well. And at the time, I was still employed at the hospital, so I kind of changed into my manager role and said, "Excuse me, sir. You have to understand, it's not a deli counter. It's not you take a number and you're going to get picked in the sequence. It's about a need, priority, and your loved one is frankly not sick enough for the staff to see right now. If someone's breathing difficulties, if they're bleeding or hemorrhaging, which is lots of blood flow, or they're having a heart attack, they get seen first. You are not going to be seen at that time." Well, I couldn't get in to see my doctor. And that is unfortunate. But coming to the emergency for primary care is fraught with challenge. It's not possible to do that for everybody. It emerges for people who are in emergent situations. Chest pain, not breathing well, bleeding.
You got an award. Sorry. You got an award for a lifetime of advocacy. Why did you get involved in advocacy, and what were you advocating about?
Anything and everything. I advocate for pain medication, patients breathing fast and end of life, and it's like they're suffering. I'm on the phone to the doctor, whose response was, "Well, they're dying. What do we want me to do? I want you to order something to take the edge off for the patient so that they're not gasping like a fish out of water." And that is an example of advocacy. Advocacy is explaining to an MPP who came to my workplace, it's take your MPP to work day, and giving a scenario where a patient was brought to the hospital because their medications weren't working. Well, what happened was the patient didn't take any medications because they couldn't afford medications and rent. So they made a choice of shelter versus their medications, which then exacerbated their condition, and they ended up in the hospital. That's a societal, the community issue. And that's where the lines get blurred from hospital walls and community. The hospital exists within a community. So where people are in their state of moving, the care needs to be the same across the sectors. So when people are struggling in the community, they need their home care, they need community care, they need primary care. Because the quest is to keep people out of hospitals. Hospitals are for sick people, not people who are not able to manage their health conditions. So that's one area of advocacy. Another area of advocacy is for the nurses themselves, in terms of treatment for fairness and what is a healthy work environment. Healthy work environment is having adequate resources. I should not be crawling through the hospital looking for adult briefs because my unit didn't get a delivery. Just-in-time delivery is a vagabond for hospitals. It's like, I remember sick kids one morning, Monday morning, and we're told there's no number 8 size suction catheters. What are we going to do for respiratory care? I say we need to be able to call 1-800 suction catheters and obtain suction catheters. They said, well, they said they're in a truck. Where's the truck? I said, that's bullshit. So I advocated that way. It's small actions, but they grow into bigger ones. And teaching staff, nurses about their own health. It's extraordinary to me that nurses didn't learn about shift work, how to sleep during the daytime. Nurses who choose to look after their children and go sleep when they can. You know how banks are with credit cards. If you don't pay them, there's a big impact of interest, and they garnish your wages at some point. Well, sleep banks are like that. If you do away with sleep and you don't catch up, your body will punish you. It will break down.
Some people brag about, oh, I can get by on 3 hours of sleep. I wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning. You don't believe in that?
I've seen people when they're working, and it's a fallacy for most people. There are some people who, yes, they can get by 3-4 hours, but there are not very many. A lot of demands on people when they're family, and that's when another part of my information keynote was the community and the important role they have in looking after their nurses, the families and friends. Families, they need to help with the environment. I grew up with a shift worker. My father was a shift worker for a manufacturing company, and we learned to stay quiet during the days when he was sleeping nights. There was a courtesy that you did to the person that's working shifts, the person who's paying the bills. You're looking out for them. So I had some staff who talked about their family didn't see that they needed to be quiet during the daytime. So coaching them on how to approach that topic with their family. I said, are you a primary breadwinner? She said, well, yeah, I'm the person who has benefits. I said, then you have a position of power in your family. I said, you need to talk to your husband. I said, you have to let him see the ways that it's wise to tell his parents to be quiet during the daytime. And within a week or two, I asked her how things were going at home. She said, I was terrified talking to my husband. But she said he understood, and he would talk to his parents. I said, and the parents are okay with that? She said, they're actually helping. They make my dinner, so I have something to take to work. I said, well, this is a good thing. That's a simple act of advocacy, working through with other people.
I'd be interested in knowing what your attitude is about the state of our healthcare system currently in Ontario. You know, during the last Ontario provincial election, during the last federal election, we heard a lot of claims about how great our healthcare system is, but then also lots of arguments that we needed to invest more dollars in it. But other issues sort of were deemed more important, ballot box questions. Donald Trump, the president of the United States, has been arguing that we'd be better off if we joined the United States because we'd have the American healthcare system, which I've lived in the United States, so I've experienced that healthcare system and the need to present a credit card before you got any services. What's your sense? How does someone who spent 40 years in our healthcare system, worked in hospitals and other places, been involved in advocacy, what do you think about the state of our healthcare system in Ontario today?
It's a struggle. It's a challenge with the technology because it's very expensive to support guided imagery and MRI scans and computer charting systems. It's like the other challenge is you have an aging workforce. So we've had a lot of outflow with nurses that are experienced. Also, they take the most groovy model of care that the Americans ran through 5 or 10 years ago and run it up here. So we have an interesting collection of ideas that are running through the system And one of them is to have managers that are not clinicians of the nursing persuasion. The nurses are troublemakers, and they cause waves. Someone who got restructured out of her job. um, and it's really tough because health is such a broad term. Health is relative in terms of what you need. Like young children need vaccines. They need to be monitored for growth and development. And for that to happen, they need to have good nutrition. They need the determinants of health to fulfill their destiny. I'm an immigrant child. I was born in England. My parents came here for a better life. Translation, they came for a better life for their children. So my designation was the daughter, the nurse, and my dad would say the son, the police officer. So we are been productive members of the community. We're a success. But the reality is we observe and watch people who are struggling in our society, in our communities. And they have a limited voice, if any voice. They're scared because they don't know how they're going to pay their rent and pay for their child's autistic training. The seniors are struggling because they need more support. And can they get it in their own homes? That would be lovely. But the families are stretched in providing that. So there are a lot of demands on the healthcare system.
Yeah, no, it sounds like there is. And so I've got to ask you, is it a problem of lack of funding of our hospitals and our doctors and nurses? Is it funding of the healthcare system? Or you've mentioned on several occasions that people should be, they should have an income such that they can take their medicine. They should have a house. They have mental health problems, or they should be aging in their house. So on numerous occasions in this conversation already today, you've talked about funding of things in society that would keep them out of the healthcare system, or at least limit their drain or use of the healthcare system. Or you've talked about management, that we've got the management that's wrong. Where do you see the problem? Is it money? Is it management? Is it our society in general?
All of the above. It's a mess. It's you have the transfer payments increased from the federal government per province, but there is no reciprocity. Like there's no demands from the federal government to say, where are you spending this money? I was reading a report that said that the provincial government has been underfunding Ontario's healthcare by hundreds of millions of dollars. Why would they do that when there is a need? People are drowning in their workload, and they're leaving with their feet to leave the profession.
So is Trump right? Should we adopt an American-style healthcare system, a private two-tier system?
No, because you're gonna have people left in the debris that aren't covered. The number of people not covered in the U.S., even with Obamacare, is still 30 million people, and they're the most vulnerable in your society. The society is predicated on success by how you look after those that are most vulnerable. And I'm sorry.
I apologize. That was very profound. Say that again, please.
What did I just say?
You said society is defined by how we take care of our most vulnerable, or something like that. Is that?
Yeah. Our society is judged by how well we take care of our most vulnerable in the society.
Our society is judged by how we take care of our most vulnerable.
Yeah.
It almost sounds like something that the former Pope would have said, and certainly not what we're hearing from any elected politicians today.
Yeah, the difficulty is you have like the substance, the controlled substance centers, which they've been threatening to close. And it's like, well, where are those people going to go? And they have to go into treatment. Well, people's readiness to go into treatment is predicated by individual needs and where they were ready to go. And the message that kind of comes through, I'm sorry to say, is that these people need to die. They need to get rid of, they need to remove themselves from our society.
You think the message that government is saying about people that are hooked on drugs is that they need to die? You think that's the message that our society is telling them?
That's the message you get when you ask them about programs that could be put in place, and the safe supply, like the toxicity issues and smuggling. I mean, Europe has some measures that they're taking, and they've had some success in helping people through the substance abuse phase of their life. It's not something that has to be forever.
So safe injection sites you think we need to have and fund?
It's a way, it's a mechanism. It also speaks to what people are looking for. Why they're looking for a high. Life isn't about all highs. Life is about peaks and valleys. It takes time for counseling to help for people.
And I think you've got to be ready for it. And so, some of these programs and policies that talk about, enforced therapy, I don't think it works until someone's ready. Too many people that I've interviewed say that, you almost have to hit rock bottom. You have to have something bad happen. You have to have an emergency. You have to have a crisis, because that's what motivates you to make the change. And if you don't have that motivation...
Going back to my contractual arrangement with the universe, these souls may be the ones that have to hit rock bottom to meet their contractual agreement. They chose this life to explore that. And our guardians that are with us may indeed be with them when they have an overdose and go, so how was that? And it would be like, well, it was too short. Life was too short. And I think the blessing that comes through at the end is that being here is a blessing. And how do you get people to move beyond their own issues to looking after their fellow man?
We're chatting tonight with Paula Manuel. She spent 40 years in the nursing industry and the nursing business. She's been an advocate for nurses. Last week, I had the privilege of listening to her give a keynote speech at a Nurses Week dinner, and she's even better today. She's been really quite interesting. We're going to take a break for some messages and come back in just 2 minutes with Paula. I'm going to ask her about some of the recommendations she made to nurses to take better care of themselves, because some of her suggestions, I said, this is great for everybody. And then I'm going to ask her a couple of other questions about what's going on with our healthcare system today and some of the big issues that we're confronting. Stay with us, everyone. We'll be back in just 2 minutes. Welcome back, everyone, to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour. This week is Nurses Week, and we have with us Paula Manuel, who has spent 40 years as a registered nurse, caring for children from 23 weeks, premature infants, to 104 years old. She's a storyteller. She's a resource on how to optimize the well-being of nurses. She's been a direct care clinician, an award-winning leader. She's been recognized by the Registered Nurses Association of Ontario for an award of merit, a lifetime achievement, and last week I had the privilege of seeing her get a excellence in lifelong advocacy for her colleagues, patients, and communities in the nursing profession. We've been chatting about what she sees as the challenges in her own career of being a nurse, and some of the wonderful successes that she's had. She's talked about some of the concerns she has about our healthcare system. And Paula, one of the things that I really found interesting about your speech last week is you spent a lot of time talking to the nurses themselves about how they could be better nurses and survive the stress, the pressures, etc. And you talked about resilience and several other things. Can you tell us a little bit about some of the suggestions you made? Because I thought they were extremely applicable to not just nurses, but to all of us.
Yeah, it's about becoming aware of your own being. It's about facing adversity yourself and how you're going to do that. Courage, grace, and honor are values that nurses can
courage, grace, and honor. I like that.
Yeah. Resiliency, of course, is a capacity to rise above what's going on. It's to keep your eye on the quest, which is in nursing, is to relieve pain, provide optimal care, safe care, compassionate care. And the caring has to start with yourself. If you don't care for yourself, you're not going to be much good. There's a great aviation analogy. When they tell you that the oxygen mask may drop down when the plane depressurizes, you have to put the mask on yourself first, or you're going to lose consciousness. So it's like that with nursing. Before you can look after others, you have to make sure you are fed and fueled, slept well, ready for whatever's going to come down the pipeline. And if the oxygen masks fall down in front of you, you best be putting on that oxygen mask, because not much good to you draped over the patient dead because you didn't feed that. And that's where, as nurses, you have to keep working away at that, practicing that, because you might reach a point where you're not going to be able to do that anymore if you don't practice some good nutrition, good sleep hygiene, just stress management. It is a stressful job. And I mean, I went home a few times where by the way I walked in the house, my dad knew it was a tough day. He would come up with a tumbler of scotch and say to me, "Was it toughie?" And it was like, yeah, it was tough. So, did I drink scotch every day? No. But it was certainly welcome when they came. And what's interesting about experience as a nurse is we get smarter as we get older, at least most of us do. And we don't need our muscles so much as we use this head with the brain and that capacity of the heart to show our vulnerability. And that's when our creativity comes through. And that's Brené Brown's work.
Why is being vulnerable important for a nurse?
Because being a machine and having walls built up around you detracts you from the humanity of what you're doing. The work we do is very humane, and you cannot be a robot. You think you're protecting yourself, but you're closing yourself off to everything in the world, and this beautiful world. There's such beauty in nature. I always pursued things like hiking and nature and photography.
And
because
golf?
of those reasons. And golf, absolutely. Whether I'm in the trees or not, or sand, it's like, it's okay. So we're playing today.
Can I ask you about a couple of other questions while I've got you? Some people say that we've got a coming tsunami of baby boomers that are all going to be in their later senior years, not early seniors years, but later seniors years. And we're just not prepared for that because we're going to be inundated with people that are going to be needing to be cared for in long-term care facilities and or at home, and or if those aren't sufficient, they're going to be coming to emergency rooms. What do you think about sort of that demographic, bulge that's going to be aging and is aging?
This is a very advocate-centered generation. I'm a boomer myself. I'm a tail end. The boomers are different than the traditional seniors. They are much more outspoken. They have a much more active lifestyle. They have a need to be in their own homes. They want replacement of body parts that aren't working, like knee replacements and hip replacements. And that's become more fine-tuned. There's certain aspects of the healthcare system that has technology working for it and processes in place to have assessments done rapidly. And then they're able to stage people as to when they need to have replacement parts. The cataracts and stuff like that, they can do lots of people in a day. Technology that helps. But the boomers, I'm not too worried about them.
They'll take care of themselves?
They're going to be, because they are advocates themselves. they're active in seniors groups, and I'm in a community now with lots of seniors, and it's amazing the things they get up to. They're involved in. They do food banks, and they are doing services that way. They're people who have part-time jobs because they're bored. They don't need the money so much as they just need the interaction with other people. They've worked all their lives and they aren't ready to slow down.
Okay, let me ask another question then. Assisted suicide has been an issue. Do you believe in it? Do you agree with it?
Suffering is a very individual thing, and if someone believes they're suffering and their terminal condition, respect their need. And it's not assisted suicide, it's medical assistance in dying, which covers a gamut of services because palliative care is a form of that package of services to be provided. It's about not suffering anymore. So people who have ALS, others that have Huntington's disease, there's some people who've chosen to have medical assistance in dying. And these are people who are irrational, and they go through very stringent conditions to ascertain that they really want to do this. It can be hard for the families, but again, it's a part of that nursing care that is on the gray zone of life, and you do what you can do to support that person. The hospitals is ideally not where you want to have it done, but it was where it was being done because the supports were not in the community. And some nurses would decline to look after a patient who was getting aid. And so as long as somebody on the ward would take the patient, it wasn't a problem. But if they all refused, it took a manager like myself to say, we can't all say no. And it was interesting to realize that people didn't understand what MAID was about. And we weren't in the business of finding people to kill, so to speak. We truly were it was a form of support to ease suffering.
A form of support to ease suffering. Let me ask another question. One of the other nurses that got an award just before your award was a public health nurse that got an award for fighting against against vaccine hesitancy and for encouragement of taking vaccines. What's your attitude toward, we've got this outbreak of measles right now. What should society's attitude toward vaccines be?
You froze up.
Are you there?
Here's the froze. Vaccine hesitancy.
Yes, I was asking about vaccine hesitancy. How do you feel about that?
There's a lot of different things contributing to that. I personally don't believe in vaccine hesitancy. I think it's a good idea to have vaccines. Anecdotally, people have had challenges and issues that have risen, or they correlated to vaccines, but millions of people have had vaccines and they're doing fine. Like we have measles outbreak right now in Ontario and Canada, and that is again directly correlated to the pandemic because some of the kids got behind on their vaccines. There was an issue a few years ago because the vaccine, when they went back, was not efficacious to giving kids immunity, so they had to have boosters. So there's a lack of knowledge about awareness about a lot of things related to health, and people listen to celebrities perhaps and put stock in their opinion, but it almost correlates to theirs, so it's easy to do that switch. But you hear things like there's a Robert F. Kennedy, guy that's Secretary of Health and Human Resources in the States.
Yep.
He's a scary dude. I've listened to some of his comments and I'm like, are you on the same planet? Uh, and when people say, well, there's no harm in measles, it's just childhood disease. Well, I've looked after children of infants of mothers that were exposed to measles, and some of them died. So I think that's rather significant when you lose a child. Polio was a childhood disease, and the vaccine was revolutionary. But those souls, many of them had post-polio syndrome, which they got as adults, boomers, and they had an impact on the whole life about that. So it's very interesting, people's beliefs. There's some that will, when they get diagnosed with cancer, they don't want any treatment if it's stage 4. And the researchers are hoping people will be pioneers and go for the treatment. But there's no guarantees in life. But if you're a bit of a daredevil, you can explore that option. I looked after a lot of children that were pioneers, and their efforts helped kids down the road. I remember we had a series of children who were born with a skin condition that really compromised their immune system. And the first 10 children, we lost them within a month because we just didn't have the protocols. And we finally came up with some solid ways of looking after them, and we had success. These children, I went home. When we got them past their vulnerable state of their immune system, we were able to get them home. And those pioneers that died contributed to the care of the children later on. So that's the eye on the ball as to what we have to do. And we need to do a better job of explaining things with people without sounding sanctimonious.
Paula, I think that you probably are one of the best people I've heard that have that way of speaking to people, not sounding sanctimonious, but just explaining it in frank language. I really appreciate you joining us today, and congratulations on your awards, your lifetime achievement for advocacy, and other awards, and thank you for your message: resilience, courage, grace, honor, compassion, self-care, vulnerability, creativity, and that we have this contractual obligation with the universe. I think you've got some wonderful messages to share with people. I appreciate it, and happy Nurses Week.
Thank you. If anyone's interested, I have a blog, lifeofanurse.com. Gather more pearls from me.
That's our show for tonight, everybody. Thank you for joining us. I remind you, I'm on every Monday through Friday at 6 o'clock on 960 a.m. Good night.